A special thanks to my Patreon supporters. It's Halloween month. What are some of the creepy/paranormal encounters you've had or heard? I woke up at night for a glass of water. I walked to the kitchen and ran into my dad. He walked right past me to the front door. He didn't even acknowledge me being there. I asked him, "Where are you going?" He didn't say anything, just had a blank stare and walked out the door. I walked over and looked out the window peephole on the door. We had a small walkway that connected to our driveway. He was sitting on the walkway, hunched over, elbows on his knees, under a big tree that was in front of my bedroom, just staring into nothing. I walked into my mom's bedroom and asked her why my dad was outside. She turned over and said, "What do you mean?" "He's right here." There was my dad, laying by my mom's side in a deep sleep. When I was a kid, 7 years old, my grandpa was visiting from Mexico for a week during summer vacation. For that week, I was sleeping on the floor since my grandpa was sleeping in my bed. One night around 1 a.m., I woke up suddenly with that feeling that somebody was watching me. I was terrified to look behind me, so I laid facing my night light. I could sense that whoever it was directly behind me, like as if I reached back, I would touch him. I kept hoping whoever or whatever it was would go away when all of a sudden, he spoke to me. He asked, "Who are you?" but in a really deep voice, like that of the Allstate commercial guy. I didn't answer. Again, he says, "Who are you?" I still didn't answer, hoping that he would leave if I didn't say anything. I knew that it was my grandpa because he didn't speak a word of English and I didn't recognize the voice at all. As I was trying to figure out who it was, he spoke again. This time he said, "I know who you are, you're Jacob." I freaked out. I jumped up and ran to my parents' room crying. I didn't even bother to look at who it was because I didn't want to waste a second getting away from him. I crawled into my parents' bed with tears in my eyes and watched the door to the bedroom to see if it would follow me. After about a minute or two of staring at the bedroom door, I saw him, or it. I saw this black figure move across the doorway. It wasn't 5 feet tall and seemed to be leaving the house. That wasn't my last encounter with it, but definitely the most terrifying. My dad told me when he was little, he used to go stay at my great-aunt's house every now and then. He would stay in this room that he described as a nursery. The walls were pink, there was some older furniture in there, it was very motherly. Well, one night, he said he looked up and saw a woman standing in the doorway. It wasn't threatening, but she was just watching him, almost like a mother watching her kid sleep, he told me. The woman dissipated and my dad went into the kitchen. His dad and my great-aunt were still up talking. He told his dad he saw a woman standing in the door and asked who she was, and at that moment my grandfather's eyes widened. He excitedly jumped up from the table, pointed at my great-aunt and said, "I told you." I knew I was not imagining it. Apparently when he was younger, he too saw the woman in the doorway. Reminds me of a story my mom and brother told me. When my brother was youngish, about 8, he was just chilling at my grandma's house. See, my mother was adopted, so our grandma/that entire family looks nothing like my mother. He was sitting in the basement, playing with toys, when he sees, lo and behold, my mother walk down the stairs. This is exceedingly odd, considering my mother was at work. That's why my bro was at our grandma's in the first place. There are a few major differences between the mysterious lady and our mother, however. He notices that, though she looks like my mother, she also looks a lot older. My brother was a teen pregnancy, and this woman certainly wasn't in her 20s. Secondly, the woman was wearing a white dress. Not quite a wedding dress, just a white dress. It resembled a white dress my grandma had hanging in the downstairs bedroom, a white dress my family inherited. The white dress apparently had something almost religious to it. Sacred, almost. Keep in my mind my brother is absolutely not religious in any way. The woman just kinda stood there, and she had a very motherly air. Like she was just there to watch over my brother, not hurt her. She walked out and nobody in the house saw her. My sister has a very similar story about seeing this exact same woman. We're not a superstitious family, but the only theory we can think up is that it's our biological grandmother, the one we've never met. My family has been basically followed by weird-ass paranormal happenings our entire lives. I've got tons more if anyone's interested. Hauntings, witches, curses, all sorts of crazy-ass shit. I was about 6 years old. My grandparents were staying in the guest bedroom by the door. We had an alarm system. I woke up laying in the street outside my house. I was really freaked out and just have a memory of seeing an owl swoop down and grab a snake and take off. Feeling more awake and having my senses come back, I go back to my house to go in. The door is locked. I grabbed the spare key from the hiding place, opened the door, and set off the alarm. It had been on. My grandparents came rushing to me and turned off the alarm and kept asking me why I was trying to leave. I kept saying I woke up outside and was trying to go back to bed, but they just said I was sleepwalking. I had the key from outside though. Still freaks me out to this day. I was living alone in my mid-20s and I was asleep in my queen-sized bed. I woke up suddenly to the feeling that someone was sleeping beside me. I was laying on my side, facing the outer edge of the bed. I laid there for quite a while racking my brain if I forgot I was halfway through a one-night stand or something, but I knew I wasn't. As far as I knew, there should have been no one else in my house. So I laid there listening to someone else breathing and making slight movements every so often. I was frozen in fear, afraid to roll over and look. Suddenly, I felt the bed move and heard movements like this person was rolling over and leaning towards me. I felt its hot breath in my ear as it hissed, "Do you want to fight?" I broke out of my frozen state and bolted for the door, ran out of the room and out of the house. Luckily it was a fairly warm night as I sat on my porch for a long time hyperventilating, panicked and wondering if someone was in my room or did I just dream the whole thing. It took a long time to get my nerve up to sneak back into my living room to grab my phone, run back outside and call the police. They showed up, searched the entire house and found nothing. I felt so embarrassed, but I swear it was real. The cops were cool and told me I had no reason to be embarrassed. I can still hear his evil hissing voice to this day, "Do you want to fight?" I remember thinking, fight about what? I didn't do anything. Back in school there was a story that had been floating around for years about a boy named Ronald who had hung himself in the toilet. The school's over 100 years old, and there were plenty of stories about weird/creepy stuff that students/teachers experienced, with quite a few involving Ronald. Anyway, the only one I experienced possibly involving Ronald, along with a few others, happened when I was in junior school. I was taking a dump in the toilets that night and I heard someone walking quickly towards the end of the line of toilets and remember seeing a shadow of legs walking past from the space under the toilet door. After I was done, I went out and called out toward the person supposedly in one of the end toilets, asking if they are afraid to go back to the dorm alone and they'd like me to wait for them, something we were told to do in boarding school in junior classes. There was no response, so I checked the end toilets. All doors were open and were empty, so I ran the full length back to the dorm. Later found out it had happened to a couple others before, not the same way but similar incidents. I was 11 years old when I had my paranormal experience. I was on vacation with my parents in Ocean City, Maryland. It was the final night in our hotel room and I woke up early in the morning to take a leak. As I reached the bathroom, something caught my attention and I saw a tall shadowy figure against the wall. It looked like a man who wore a trench coat along with a small top hat. The sight frightened me and I sprinted to my bed immediately and threw the covers over me till noon. I spoke to my parents about it the next day and my dad told me he had seen the same shadow man when he went to mess with the thermostat early in the morning. It was spooky because our descriptions of the shadow figure were spot on with each other. Okay, so weird shit has been happening at my house lately. A knock on the backyard window while I was on the couch. I ran outside and turned the lights on and nobody was there. I remember being home and suddenly my GF and I heard my front door slam. When I got to it, the door was locked. We were in the kitchen and didn't see anyone. I again ran outside and didn't see anybody. Just last night, though I'm blaming my dog for this one for the sake of sanity, a picture of my dad and his brothers as babies was hanging on the wall and crashed onto the floor like it was thrown against the other side of the hallway. Horizontal, not actually down the hallway, and like 2 weeks ago I smelled cigarettes. At 3 a.m. All doors and windows closed. I really hate cigarettes and I can smell them a mile away. Nobody in my family smokes. The only person we knew who smoked was my old neighbor who died a couple months earlier and I was the only one home. Scared me shitless. I try not to think about these things often. I love paranormal stories, just not when it happens to me. My mom's friend, Sarah, used to see this guy around town. He wore a yellow shirt with blue overalls and had blonde hair. She saw him everywhere, and I mean everywhere. She saw him in the grocery store staring at her, on the street corner staring at her as she drove around the city, on the bus staring at her, and in other places too, like a park and outside a friend's house. One day, Sarah came home and found that guy staring at her in her own house. She freaked out thinking he was a stalker and broke in when he vanished before her own eyes. Years later, my mom came over for a visit and slept at her house. My mom woke up in the middle of the night to see the same man staring at Sarah sleeping on the other couch. When my mom began to sit up, the man turned around, stared at my mom for about 10 seconds, began trying to talk to her, though no noise came out, and then disappeared. After Sarah moved, she never saw the man again, but thinks anyone who lived in the house she lived in is haunted by that man around town till they move. No information about those who live there now. I do have more stories, but they're different from this. When I was a young child, I was very scared one night, can't remember why. I was probably around 4 or 5, so my natural impulse was to go sleep with my parents. They let me sleep in their bed, but I couldn't fall asleep because I was still so scared. I felt like I was being watched. Now, there was a clawfoot full-body mirror in the corner of my parents' room, facing their bed. I had that feeling of being watched still, so I poked my head up over the covers and scanned the room, and I saw what was watching me. There was a girl in the mirror. Looking back on it now, she was probably about 9 to 10. She had pale skin and curly black hair, and was wearing a bell-shaped white dress. It had lots of ruffles on it. She had a matching white hat. It was the size of a big floppy sun hat, but it was stiff, not floppy. I remember getting out of bed and going to stand in front of the mirror. She didn't move or say anything, but I remember that she wavered, like when you throw a rock through your reflection on the water. We stared at each other for a while, and then I got scared again and dove back into my parents' bed. That mirror has never done anything like that again, and has since been sold, but the house we lived in at the time was always wonky. A malevolent feeling, the sensation of always being watched, things touching me when nothing was there. I once saw a shadow person standing on the stairs before gliding into the laundry room, in broad daylight. If you slept in certain rooms you would have horrific nightmares. It got worse after my parents divorced and my dad started emotionally abusing my brother and I. I truly believe that there is something in that house that feeds off the negative energy there. It was never a happy home, even before my parents split. I would think that the girl was a dream, except I was wide awake. I also don't believe that that girl was the malevolent presence I was sensing. I think she just used the mirror to check me out. Weirdly enough though, about 6 years later I found a porcelain doll at a garage sale that looked just like her, minus the hat. I bought it because it was pretty, but found out when I got home that it was actually very creepy. It always seemed to be watching me. I often wonder if it and the girl in the mirror were related in any way. My family and some of friends' families went on a trip around Europe. When we were in our hotel in Switzerland, all of us teens could not sleep at night due to the fact of all the Swiss chocolate we ate on arrival. Anyways, so my group of friends were sitting in the conference room of the hotel when we decided to go search the basement of the hotel. Worst decision ever. Once we reach the basement, it is pitch black, unable to see 10 feet in front of us. Being incompetent, we decide to go ahead and search in the dark, finding only an indoor pool and a gym. 10 minutes and we decide to go back up, but we cannot find our way back. 5 minutes of looking for the stairs, we come across a door that sent a chill down my back. I open the door and it is completely dark with another door which has light seeping through. As I look up, all I see is the bottom half of a girl. Very vivid till this day. She was wearing a checkered school dress with white knee socks and black schoolgirl shoes. No torso, no face, just legs swinging back and forth. My sister used to live in a house where a lot of freaky stuff went down. For example, she had a lot of night lights of the Virgin Mary in the house. We grew up Catholic, so there's a lot of meaning in have her around as a protection symbol. One day she went to take a nap downstairs. The bedrooms were all in what used to be the basement of the house many years ago. When she awoke, all the night lights were surrounding her bed. She thought her husband had played a prank on her, but he was just as shocked as she was. Other weird stuff happened too, like hearing voices upstairs when no one was there, the doorbell going off even though the wires were disconnected, handprints in towels bigger than any male that stepped foot in that house. Nobody wanted to go downstairs, especially the animals, which are believed to be more sensitive to paranormal energy. So glad they moved out of there. Still freaks me out to even think about it. I swear that my house is haunted. It's little things that make my hair stand on end, and usually when I'm alone with my 10-month-old. Some common ones: spatula moves while I'm cooking, or pot handle is turned the wrong way when I come back. My son giggles at nothing in his room while staring into the distance, fixated on something. He only giggles like that at someone making faces at him. We have a video monitor for his room. My laundry hamper moved across the room. The ironing board moved from my vanity to across the room on the floor without making a sound, etc. 2 big ones. I walked outside to get the mail and came back in, feeling like I was being watched. My dog and son, in a walker, were staring at the opposite door. Suddenly my dog bolts to the couch and hunkers down. I pick up my kid, wondering what the fuck is happening, and get an overwhelming scent of cologne. Like a super strong nice cologne smell, as if someone wore too much and walked directly next to me. It lingered for a second then faded like someone walked away. I checked every one of my husband's colognes and none smell like that at all. It's never happened since. The other happened recently, while my husband was home. The hallway that leads to my son's room ends in 3 doors. One at the end, then one on the left wall and one on the right. I keep them closed at night because open doors make me anxious, no clue why. I went to get some water and glanced over to see the door at the end wide open, my dog standing in the entrance with his head down. I yelled to ask my husband if he opened it and he said no, checked around with me, then said that it probably got blown open or I forgot to close it. I never opened that door all day, as it's the guest room and no one was over. I tried pushing the door and everything, seeing if the dog could have opened it, but no dice. I tried leaving it cracked and the draft closed it every time. It used to be my husband's grandparents' house. His grandpa and aunt passed away here, but I don't particularly think anyone believes in ghosts in his family, so I don't mention my theory to anyone that maybe one or both of them are checking in on the little dude, since they didn't get to physically meet him. The other happened recently, while my husband was home. The hallway that leads to my son's room ends in 3 doors. One at the end, then one on the left wall and one on the right. I keep them closed at night because open doors make me anxious, no clue why. I went to get some water and glanced over to see the door at the end wide open, my dog standing in the entrance with his head down. I yelled to ask my husband if he opened it and he said no, checked around with me, then said that it probably got blown open or I forgot to close it. I never opened that door all day, as it's the guest room and no one was over. I tried pushing the door and everything, seeing if the dog could have opened it, but no dice. I tried leaving it cracked and the draft closed it every time. It used to be my husband's grandparents' house. His grandpa and aunt passed away here, but I don't particularly think anyone believes in ghosts in his family, so I don't mention my theory to anyone that maybe one or both of them are checking in on the little dude, since they didn't get to physically meet him.